If you aren't too sure about how monograms work and are a little bit intimidated by them, then this easy, ready-to-use monogram method will work perfectly for you and will have your project up and running in no time at all. Monogrammed clothing is a great way to set your event apart from all of the others and to add a little bit of something extra. And with a few very easy to follow steps, we're going to create our own Cricut monogram, perfect for any event. My name is Kelly, and I'm coming to you from my craft room in South Africa to help teach you about Cricut. I've been using Cricut and similar machines for quite a few years, and I absolutely love teaching people how to use their machines, and what better way to do it than on Envato's Tuts Plus YouTube channel. So make sure to subscribe for more Cricut videos in the future. Now we're going to take a look at what font we're going to use. There are so many different monogram ready fonts on Envato Elements, and we have so many to choose from. But the type of font that we're going to be using today is going to be a split font. So that's where all of the hard work has already been done for you. You don't have to do any of the heavy lifting. Isn't that great? And this has a lovely little space in the middle where we can add our surname. Now, we will be using this on a t-shirt, so we can use so many of the different fonts with all of these fun embellishments because we don't have to worry about the vinyl lifting. Now, you do want to make sure that you're trying to find a font that is suited for your particular event. You may not want to have something that has way too many flourishes if it's a very simple styled event. But because we're going to be going with a wedding theme, we are going to use a font with lots of flourishes on it, as this is suited for so many different wedding themes. Well, let's take a look at what fonts we're able to use in Envato Elements. So on Envato Elements, I'm going to click up in the search bar and I'm going to type in Monogram. And it does come up with a few pre-populated fields that we can choose from. So I'm going to select Monogram in fonts, because that's exactly what I'm looking for. Why not go there quicker, right? And here we can see so many different fonts that we can choose from. Like I said, it's important to match up what you're going to be using the font for and the type of font that you choose. So if you have a very simplistic wedding, then you might not want to go for a font that has lots of flourishes and lots of assets on it. But if you've got a more of a traditional wedding type style, then you can go with a font that has a few more elements to it. And if this font is going to be for a business, then perhaps something that is a little bit more professional looking, depending on the style of your business, of course. So we can take a look through all of the different fonts that they have, the monogram fonts. Like I mentioned, I'm looking specifically for the split monogram. So we could even type in the search bar, split monogram, and it immediately comes up with quite a few different options that are perfect for what we want to do. Now, the one that I am going to be choosing in this tutorial is the Naylor monogram font. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But what I can do if I want to take a look at the different fonts that we have, I can click into it and open up the images on the side to see the style a little bit closer. And here we have all of the characters. So this is very much in line with what I want to do. So I'm going to click download and I'm going to add the font to a monogram project because that's what I'm working with. Once it's downloaded the zip file, I'm going to open the zip file and I'm going to open the folder, and here we see a few different file types. Now, what is nice about this particular one is that it has the SVG, or the Scalable Vector Graphics file, that we can use. So if you are struggling with the fonts, then you can just use the SVG file and upload it to Cricut Design Space. Or you can use the OTF, or the Open Type font. That's generally the one that I go for. So I'm going to double click on the OTF, and we can see here that it says print or install. So I'm going to click install, and it'll install the font to my computer. And now to choose the font that we're going to be using on the inside of our monogram. You can choose a font that is a little bit different and that has some swashes and things like that. But sometimes with a monogram font that already has so much detail, it's really nice to simplify the font with a surname and just use a plain font. So we're going to the fonts section, And I'm going to actually click on the serif style just so that I see the plain serif style fonts. And I'm going to take a look at what they have. Immediately, I really like the use of the Addington font, as it is very plain and is exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm actually going to download that one, add it to the Monogram project, and follow the same steps as what we did for the Monogram font. And now that we're done installing all of those fonts, we need to make sure that we close Cricut Design Space and open it again so that all of the fonts are available. So now we need to open a new project and click on text. Now we can type in the letter that we want to use for the main font, make it a little bit bigger, and change the font by clicking on the font section. Now this will be a system font, so I need to make sure that I'm selecting system and typing in the name of the font we're going to be using. Now, if we're not quite happy with the aspect ratio of that font, so if it looks a little bit too wide and you want it a little bit taller, then what we can do is to click on the Lock Proportions button at the top of the screen, so the padlock opens. And then we can click on any one of the corners and change the dimensions a little bit. So I want to stretch this out just a little bit so that it looks a little bit taller. And now we can add in the surname into the middle of the project. So I'm going to open another text box and type in the surname. Of course, it's the same font that we used before because Cricut remembers the font that you last used, so we need to change the font again. And I'm going to once again select on the font section, select System, remove what we've written in the text box previously, and then search for the second font that we added. So it was Addington that we used, and I'm going to change it to that one. Now we can move the name into the middle of our font and maybe change the size a little bit and orient it correctly. Before we get started with the cutting of the project, we might want to add a few extra elements to this as well. If this is for a bridal shower, then you can add some extra words at the bottom, maybe have a Roussouw wedding party as an example. So if we click on the text function again, we can type in wedding party, maybe make it a little bit smaller so that it doesn't overshadow the beautiful monogram that we have. And we can highlight everything and align it so that everything lines up very nicely. So I'm going to use the align feature at the top, click on that, and I'm going to align it center horizontally. So you see it shifted over a little bit, which is exactly what we want. And we need to make sure that we are going to attach everything on this side so that it all stays together in exactly the same place that we have it here on the next screen. So because we're going to be cutting this out of iron-on or heat transfer vinyl, HTV, we need to make sure that it is going to be mirrored. Because we're cutting into the back of the vinyl, when we flip it over, that's going to be the correct side. So you can do this in the next step to select the mirror function, but I typically forget to do this when I'm doing these projects, and I know that many others do as well. So I like to do it before I get to that step. So I'm going to click on the word flip up at the top, and I'm going to say flip horizontal so that it's mirrored even before it gets to the cutting stage. At least this is a little bit more of an active reminder that what I need to cut has actually been mirrored. So I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger, around 20 centimeters or so, just to make sure that it'll stand out nicely on the t-shirt. And I'm then going to click Make It. Now, I don't need to change anything else on this screen because I am going to be cutting it on a mat, and I do want to cut it in that corner. So I'm going to click Continue and then wait for it to connect to my machine. I'm going to be using my Explore 3, and here is where I'm going to select the material type that I'm going to be cutting. Now, I am going to be cutting just regular iron-on, but foil iron-on is here, and I don't mind overcutting my iron-on just a little bit because it only cuts into the backing, and I know my machine and there's no chance that it'll cut through the backing. So I'm just going to use the foil iron-on setting. It does give you a warning to say that you must make sure that the mirror is turned on. We know that we've already selected that step. We've already mirrored, so we don't need to mirror it again. Very important. If you've flipped it horizontally on the canvas, you should not have the mirror function on, because then it's just going to flip it the right way again. So you need to decide if you want to rather do the mirror in this step, or if you want to do the mirror on the canvas like we did. So we are done on Cricut Design Space, and now we need to hop on over to our Explore 3, just in the background here. Select our iron-on. I'm going to be using this beautiful red holographic iron-on a white t-shirt, and then we will weed it and apply it together. Now we need to remove the protective sheeting from our mat, and now we need to cut our iron-on down to size. So I will be using my paper trimmer, and because it's more than 20 centimeters, I'm going to pull out the wand on the side to measure my iron-on. So I'm going to measure about 23 centimeters just to make sure that I have everything that I need. Now, we need to place our iron-on shiny side down onto our mat, because this is the glue that we're going to be cutting into. We need to make sure that this is face up, as we've already mirrored our design. So I'm going to place it in the top corners and stick it down. Now, my mat is not as grippy, so what I am going to do is I'm going to use some fun washi tape to help stick down my vinyl. So if your vinyl does this, you can just stick it down with some washi tape. So as long as you're not cutting paper, you can use some washi tape to stick down the corners of your vinyl. You also want to make sure to burnish it onto your mat really well as you possibly can. You can also use a brayer if you have one, and it allows you to get a really nice stick on your mat. And now this is ready to load into your machine, so let's get to that. So we want to load our mat with the vinyl on the inside, underneath the two sections on the side, and we're going to press the flashing load and unload button. When it is ready for us, we're going to press the flashing play button to get started. And now that that has finished cutting, I'm going to take a weeding tool, which has a nice little hooked edge, and we're going to use this to remove some of the excess vinyl or weed to see if the vinyl has cut correctly. Now, it's important to do this before you have unloaded the mat so that you can just send it to cut again if it hasn't cut properly. That piece came off quite easily with very little convincing, so I'm happy that this is cut through. So I can now press the flashing load and unload button, and we can take our vinyl out of the machine. Now that everything has been cut, we are going to remove it from our mat and put the protective sheeting back on. I'm also going to take the tape off and put the tape, if you want to, you can save this tape for later by putting it back onto the roll, just so we don't waste such pretty tape. Next, we also want to trim down the excess iron-on that we didn't use, as there's a whole strip on the side that we can use for another project. So very carefully look to see where the cut marks are, and make sure that you're not cutting off the edge of your design, because I've done that several times. Many people do like to weed this on the mat. However, I'm not such a fan of that method, so I'm going to roll it the opposite direction to try and flatten it out a little bit. So now we take our weeding tool and we grab a hold of the vinyl and we pull it back. I sometimes find it very useful to get really close down to the vinyl to make sure that you don't lose any little bits, and to weed it in sections. If you are using this particular iron-on, sometimes part of the film stays behind, and it is important to remove that. So just make sure that you get that off, otherwise it won't stick to your t-shirt, but it won't look as nice on your t-shirt. So once you're done weeding, then we will be ready to prep. Now that our decal has been weeded, we can take our shirt and start to prep it so long. So I'm going to just be using a plain white t-shirt, and I am going to be putting this on the back. So what I want to do is, while my easy press is warming up, I'm going to give this a little bit of a press to release the moisture of the shirt, and then I'm going to fold the shirt in half to get a center seam line. Now we know exactly where the middle is of this shirt, and we can do the same on the cutout of the monogram. So we fold it in half and we line up the edges, and we fold it in half at the top and the bottom. And then we line it up on the shirt. Now I'm leaving a little bit of space at the top so that it's not exactly where the hair would be, and you'd be able to see it in the middle of the shirt. I'm then going to cover the shirt with some Teflon to protect it, and take my easy press and press it over the design and start the Cricut button while applying a little bit of pressure. Now we can see that we got the entire shirt, which is great. And I'm just going to let this cool off before I remove the sheet. What you can do is to place it face down on the floor, on a tile or something cold. I'm also going to flip it over and apply 25 seconds of heat with a Teflon coat on the other side. And we can now remove the backing, the transfer sheet. And if you're anything like me, you want to give it another 5 seconds. So we're just going to put that sheet on, and we're going to just give it 5 seconds. And here is our perfect monogram. Don't forget to subscribe to the Envato Tuts Plus channel for more Cricut tutorials in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. And remember, be kind to someone today. See you soon.